Helplessly, a desperate Mustang marched, as her FO was carried away by Furious. When all hope seemed lost, flooding appeared. Lost, a surprising hero sprung from the depths of this amazing tale of a mother. Love and improbable salvation will bring about the restoration of your belief in the ties that bind everyone. Living things on the plains of Montana, extended indefinitely beneath a misleading. A black Mustang Mare is eclipsed by a blue sky, with a recognizable white crescent on her. Her forehead lightly touched hers. Storm the Fool's coat, a 2-week-old colt, resembled the luster of his mother's obsidian. Aside from the 4 white socks that created, he seemed to dance as he walked next to. Her spring had come with unexpected warmth that year, causing the mountain to melt. Snowpack more quickly than usual. What the wild horses didn't realize was that this quick melt was kilometers upstream, constructing a lethal situation of the typically calm whitewater. The stream was turning into a torrent, storm caused by an eclipse to their usual drinking location at a small bridge where generations of Mustangs had safely obtained water. But things were different today. The water flowed more swiftly and higher than she was still crossable, but she had never seen. For a mature equine, as Storm came near, his curiosity and playfulness at the water's edge. On the damp pebbles, small hooves slipped in. In a moment, the current seized him, dragging his slender frame into the turbulent. The maternal instincts of water eclipse burst into. She took action and went after her, but the brook that she thought she could handle was a furious beast to Storm's frail body. Dr. Sarah Morrison is a wildlife biologist who later looked into the situation. Outlined, spring flash floods are growing in frequency because to climate alteration, older horses can frequently maneuver currents that kill FO, resulting in tragic circumstances such as these. 1. Eclipse battled valiantly to go to Storm, but every time she approached, he was carried downstream by the water. His shrill whinnies of fear blended, accompanied by his mother's desperate calls as he vanished around a bend on the way to the mayor's deeper pools. Stumbling over, they trailed along the bank, rocks in her eyes through dense bush, never escaping the tiny, shadowy shape tumbling in the other white water. Her band's Mustangs observed from elevated terrain, but no one ventured inside the hazardous flood by the time of eclipse. Arrived at Storm's first deep pool, been carried into the center of it by his tiny legs futilely thrashing against the. He was trapped by a circular current. The mayor called to him as he paced the bank, but the depth and strength of the pool, because of the swirling effect, rescue. Too big for a horse like Storm's. His strength started to fail him. Eclipse's calls became weaker and, from urgent to rescuing her infant who was drowning earlier, all of her instincts and sight cried out at her to keep him safe, but the water was just too deep, too quickly. Strong from caves beneath the surface at the edge of the pool, old eyes observed the drama in the pool where Storm struggled had been Big Tom's residence for more than 60 years. The enormous beaver, the head of his household and creator of there are numerous dams throughout the valley, identified the distressing noises coming from his submerged entry. He noticed the young horse's waning ability to fight. Interest that was more than just curious. Tom weighed close to 70 pounds, massive for a toothed species, orange-stained after decades of eating wood and a tail that has been damaged by innumerable. His kind fought territorial warfare, lived with the Mustangs for generations, generally disregarding one another, other than when horses inadvertently beaver dam damage, but something about this circumstance led to an uncommon reply in the previous. Beaver might have been the mayor's cries of desperation, so identical to his own species' distress calls when kids were in risk. Or perhaps it was the small size of the FO, bigger than a beaver yearling, that triggered the protective. Dr. Morrison's later theory of instincts. Beavers are extremely smart creatures, featuring intricate social systems. They've been seen demonstrating compassion for their own kind, and occasionally this can transcend species limits. Big Tom carefully emerged, his little eyes absorbing the scene. The foe's nostrils were barely intact, circular currents pulling above the water. Him beneath. The mare repeatedly stood chest deep in. The shallows don't want to go, but unable to continue into the more profound water with strong motions of his. Big Tom came over, his hind feet webbed. Storm was worn out and in a panic. Hardly noticed the big brown shape. The beaver dove next to him is vanishing beneath the eclipse's swirling surface. Viewed in bewilderment as ripples, showed activity in the vicinity of her drowning. Abruptly, Storm's body moved, posture moving steadily but slowly, in the direction of shallower water beneath the. Big Tom had positioned himself on the surface, beneath the FO's abdomen with his strong, pushing upward with his torso and using his tail as a rudder to direct the procedure for both of them, was taxing for the beaver, weighing 70 pounds of muscle that was strained by the weight of the pool's current and the waterlogged floor. Both animals repeatedly plunged beneath. However, Big Tom remained resolute. Any creature would have been impressed. What we saw as observers defies typical characteristics of animal behavior observed. Morrison's colleague, Dr. James Chun, who looked over video proof of victim animal species that are actively preserving the children of a possible rival, indicates levels of empathy and cognitive ability. We're only starting to comprehend Big Tom's every inch. Storm towards the edge of the pool. The legs of the FO brushed on the submerged rocks as they moved into a shallower, acknowledging that her child was approaching her while waiting for a deeper calling. Encouragement when the hoofs of Storm discovered traction on the muddy. Big Tom came up one last time at the bottom, his scruffy face watching as his mother. The mare nuzzled her when they were reunited, a tired infant pushing himself in the direction of dryness. Land while maintaining a watchful eye on the peculiar, momentary rescuer, predator, and prey, developed to stay away from one another and shared it. Look over the sea as the storm fell on. His tiny frame was heaving on the muddy bank. Eclipse stood over him, exhausted. Her own legs trembled in protection from the agonizing water spraying from both of their coats as the head of the mare lowered, cradling her with tender urgency, urging him to remain strong. Tom, his black eyes stayed in the shallows, observing the two. His normally stoic expression appeared almost reflective. While he saw the reunion, the beaver turned after a few minutes and gently swam back to his lodge, vanishing beneath the surface with hardly any impact on the energy usage. Dr. Morrison, that rescue was tremendous. Subsequently computed, a mature beaver usually takes care to conserve energy. Big Tom would have paid more for this rescue. Calories compared to a typical week of action. Storm clambered to his feet on unsteady. Eclipse led his legs away from the water that was dangerous, but the FO had ingested large volumes of river water, and his breathing continued to be difficult. His near-drowning ordeal left him. The Mustang band was weaker and more susceptible, had seen all the drama from the. As Eclipse guided the Storm up the ridge above, Slope Thunderbolt, the main stallion, cautiously walked up to his nostrils. He scented the FO detecting and ablazed the peculiar beaver odor that clung that night to Storm's coat. Storm's circumstances made the river water in respiratory trouble as a result of his lungs. Frequent issue with near drowning. Eclipse remained around the victim's body, offering as much warmth as a mountain. Temperatures lowered. The breathing of the FO got become more strained with each breath. Visible. Dr. Chin's efforts to keep an eye on the issue, utilizing wildlife cameras, emphasized that subsequent drowning is a danger to any animal that breathes in water. Without the help of a veterinarian, the Dawn Storm has a high death rate, could hardly endure frequent eclipses. Urged him to take a nap, but the FO was. The mayor's distress appeals were not strong enough. Reverberated throughout the valley, a mother's despair that went beyond species. A quarter of a mile downstream from his lodge, the beaver came out when Tom heard the sounds from his lair, his actions deliberate as he traveled upstream on this trip. It was difficult for a creature to travel over land, designed to withstand water, yet later, persistent rangers discovered proof. The beaver of Big Tom's overland trek made a transparent path through the underbrush, something they usually only when constructing new dam locations. follow these. Trip did not serve any territorial or Big Tom arrived at useful purpose. The gathering Mustang as the sun rose. At its peak, the group dispersed uneasily. As he approaches, horses and beavers didn't usually communicate on land, although Eclipse, identifying her savior, stayed motionless as the beaver came closer. Storm directly displays his actions, what scientists would eventually refer to as evaluation patterns. He encircled the weakened for making soft, chattering noises that are usually only used for the beaver family. Conversation, what transpired next, questioned all presumptions regarding animal intelligence and species behavior. The next hour's events involving Big Tom would become renowned among animals. Researchers found that the old beaver started collecting particular plants from the nearby area, demonstrating expertise. That implied years of monitoring and discovering that he gathered willow bark known due to its ability to reduce inflammation and some mosses that beavers once lined. Dr. Morrison is evaluating their lodges. Later, film revealed that beavers are known to use willow bark as a form of self-medication for discomfort and swelling, but to view one utilizing this understanding to assist someone else. The beaver is an unparalleled species. Walked up a storm, gulp of. The Eclipse of merited willow bark stiffened, but stayed out of the way as Big Tom gently sandwiched the pulp between the FO's nostrils of willow and natural aspirin, started to lessen the swelling in storms. Next, Big Tom did something even more impressively. He waddled to a neighboring moss that was drenched in the spring. Water rich in minerals is coming back to storm. He squeezed the water close to the mouth of the funnel. The electrolytes and minerals in the spring water was precisely what this degree of dehydrated FO was required. A medical intervention that suggests cognitive skills that we usually normally associate with. Dr. Chun noted that when working with primates, beavers showed comprehension of symptoms and understanding of natural cures, and the capacity to put that knowledge into practice beyond the boundaries of species. In the afternoon, Big Tom carried on with his various sorts of ministrations, different plants, each fulfilling a distinct. Some are obviously medical in nature. Others appear to have been selected for their nutritional worth of the patient beaver. Tenacity reminded onlookers of a backcountry nurse providing vital care to Eclipse. The patient observed every action. The conflict between her maternal impulses and predator's innate fatigue. But as Storm's breathing steadily got better, the unconventional healer's credibility increased by. The foal was able to stand in the evening and dance a little shakily with the Mustang band, kept their distance while grazing, anxiously while keeping a close check on the strange collaboration that was taking place earlier. The lead stallion was thunderbolt by them. Many hostile acts directed at Big Eclipse, but Tom positioned herself, defending the beaver between them who was assisting her infant when night fell. One more difficulty emerged: storm that was required to keep the body temperature during the chilly night, but due of his compromised health, this challenging Big Tom vanished for a moment, coming back with dry grass in their mouths. With materials made of soft plant fibers, beavers, he started using it to insulate their lodges, stacking these elements around Storm, establishing a natural defense against the Eclipse. In the chilly night air appeared to comprehend the goal and receive assistance from pushing additional grass in her direction. With the beaver's hooves were basically constructing an earthly replica of a. Dr. Morrison said that the lodge chamber utilized his understanding of architecture from his aquatic setting to address an issue. By midnight, Storm was asleep on the earth, calmly within his makeshift shelter. Big Tom's breathing was deep and steady. Stayed close by, adding more insulation or monitoring his patient. Eclipse watched over them both, her head drooping in fatigue, although her eyes warned of the unlikely medical. Storm had been stabilized by intervention, but complete recuperation would necessitate ongoing. As morning drew near, Big Tom displayed no indications of leaving his adopted patient for the next few days. And unusual pattern. Grown, Tom would come out of his lodge, make the overland trip every morning, travel to see how Storm is doing and spend. Hours spent caring for the recuperation of the Mustang band eventually came to terms with the beavers were present, but they stayed. The recovery from the fearful storm advanced. Gradually, while being cared for by Big Tom, kept bringing therapeutic plants and water that is rich in minerals, but today he also participating in what could only be termed as tangible. He would encourage Storm to stand up throughout therapy, promoting action to fortify the foe's legs and get better. The beaver's circulation, comprehension of rehabilitation. Dr. Morrison's documented principles appear to be aware that controlled exercise was essential to the FO's recuperation, something that usually calls for veterinary education to recognize a surprising connection that was made between the improbable. Storm started to nicker gently. Anytime the beaver and Big Tom showed up, replied with soft chittering noises. They created a method of communication. It broke down barriers between species with distinct noises that signify various. The relationship is eclipsed by needs or activities. The mare changed along with Big Tom, would now graze in peace as the beaver occasionally took care of her, delivering premium grasses to the area around Big Tom. A heartfelt expression of appreciation mainly observes the beaver, herbivorous, but usually concentrated on aquatic plants, and bark would be sampled. Certain products with seeming admiration that is most noteworthy. Development started when Big Tom started instructing Storm on water safety, leading the fully restored foal to. The beaver is bordered by a tiny brook, showed how to measure depth, and he displayed Storm's current strength, which rocks that were stable and that were slippery information that is essential for a young. This horse in mountainous terrain symbolized mental preparation for potential possibilities. Dr. Chin clarified the beaver was getting the idiot ready for risks he could encounter later on. Foresight is usually linked to superior order. Mike Thompson, a local rancher, is pondering on whose property did the Mustangs board. Range saw these swimmers. Lessons in which a beaver could swim. Circles the colt, demonstrating to him how to navigate the sea when Storm became anxious. He would be led by the beaver to shallower. The sight was similar to observing a swimming pool. Teacher who was afraid. The lessons were not limited to water. Youngster. Big Tom showed which plants were safe. Thriving close to water were safe to consume, and wherein he demonstrated to Storm how to identify banks that are fragile and could collapse, and the way to identify the noise of distant rapids that showed there are hazardous waters ahead for these teachers. Sessions drew other young horses. From the group, a number of FO were a beaver teaching water safety, constructing a situation that was contrary to all nature. The past precedents that their parents observed anxiously, but maybe didn't step in, acknowledging the importance of these lessons. 3 weeks later, Storm had finished, recovered and significantly increased in size, assured in the water, but the relationship showed no indications between him and Big Tom of deteriorating. The beaver was now a permanent fixture of the extended family of the Mustang band. Most people accept and even welcome members. We observe the formation of a novel kind of mutually beneficial partnership. Dr. Morrison decided one that wasn't founded on mutual advantages in the conventional sense, but on emotional ties and mutual comprehension that went beyond the boundaries of species. The arrival of fall was unusually intense. That year, the mountain's intense rainfall resulted in several flash floods, which makes each crossing a brook that could be fatal. Thunderbolt's Mustang band had to. They are always changing their pathways to find secure access to grazing areas. 1. The band arrived in Whitewater in the morning. Creek at a separate, distant crossing, upstream from the area occupied by Big Tom. Although the water ran high, it wasn't impassable. Thus for Eclipse and Storm, 2 mature horses, were in. The young horse in the center of the group, 6 months old already, and noticeably bigger than when he almost drowned. Encounter when the band started to cross now. One saw the water wall speeding, the outcome of a descent from the mountains, breaking of a natural dam kilometers upstream. The first horses had just arrived at the opposite bank at the time of the flash flood. With terrible force, the water wall 3 mature horses were carried away. Right away, including Thunderbolt. Midstream Storm and Eclipse were split up right away. The mare battled too. Colt, but the current was too strong. Storm, even if he was swimming. Big Tom's instructions were overtaken by the violence of the flood from a hill. Ignoring the mayhem that Big Tom saw, the catastrophe that the beaver had been pursuing. The band from afar, keeping his relationship with Storm even beyond his typical area without hesitation. The old beaver swooped down the slope in the direction of the rushing water. The subsequent events defied all survival. Dr. Morrison reported the beaver instinctively entered hazardous floodwaters, even for his kind, motivated by a beyond reason behavior. Tom's proficiency in reading water currents demonstrated, vital as the horses battled against. The beaver used the flow to work with it, eddies and backflows to steer clear of. The young horse was being swept during the storm in the direction of several rapids that would substantiate the death eyewitness accounts of Big Tom, carrying out actions that appeared. His stature and age made it impossible for him to use. Sunken rocks are crucial elements in his strong tail, guiding him through currents that would provide difficulties for younger beavers. Decades-long construction of dams experience become nearly extraordinary capacity to read the waters. The storm's objectives were fast waning. This time, when Big Tom got to him, the beaver was unable to push from below. Instead, the current was too powerful. Storm's mane was bitten down by Tom, who used. He guided them with his body acting as a living rudder, both in the direction of a more tranquil eddy pool. The physics involved were astounding. Later, Chun determined that the beaver was, in essence, fluid dynamics, guidelines for repeatedly rerouting a bulk, his own weight, which needed to be flawless, timing and extraordinary power. It took almost an hour to retrieve Big Tom, help Storm navigate a tangle of currents, utilizing every tactic discovered after 60 years of live near water. On multiple occasions they were dragged beneath, but the beaver never let go of his hold, and eventually they arrived at a sandy beach where further horses that were still alive had collected. Eclipse was someone pushed to safety there by Big Tom's eddy current, which intended the reunion to be sentimental, with Eclipse nuzzling her weary colt and his valiant rescuer. The elderly Tom fell on the sand. Body was pushed to the limit during the rescue. Big Tom lying had cost him everything. He was still breathing on the sandy beach, shallow and put in a lot of work. Of saving Storm had used up the final reserves found in the old beavers. A powerful Eclipse that loomed over him, muzzle lightly caressing his damp fur as Storm pressed at the side of his savior. The last of the Mustangs assembled in an unheard of loop around the dying beaver, even equines that had never come into contact. Big Tom appeared to comprehend the seriousness of the situation they were in. Quiet watch as the sun started to set, applying orange-hued paint on the sky, and Dr. Morrison and her group, who had hurried to the location after spotting the flood using monitoring devices, kept a polite distance, saying, "We're seeing something holy," she said, subsequently composed a farewell ceremony that crossed the bounds of species. Storm rested next to Big Tom, his young body that keeps the beaver warm, cooling from the soft colt. The same nickering noises he had previously employed. Big Tom's during their swimming lessons. Though they were dimming, the eyes followed the action. One final time of his adopted pupil as darkness enveloped Big Tom's respiration. He was gently prodded by the paused Eclipse, repeatedly, as though to rouse him, prior to ultimately acknowledging the reality. What followed astounded even seasoned. The Mustang Band is a group of wildlife researchers. Started each horse in a slow procession, reaching out to touch Big Tom's body, momentarily using their muzzle before proceeding. Storm stayed by his friend's side until sunrise, when the Eclipse eventually persuaded. He left, but the tale continued. Big Tom's passing during the subsequent months, there were notable changes in the actions of the Mustang Band. They started constructing routes to water that evaded hazardous currents that are putting Big Tom has instructed young people on safety measures. FO received active training from senior horses in water safety methods. The Beaver had shown that we recorded the initial instance of cross-species, the incorporation of knowledge transmission into the cultural norms of a wild population, procedures that Dr. Chen detailed in his breakthrough study on the wisdom of beavers, survived the spraying of the horse, brought about a surprising discovery close to the creek where Storm had initially almost. When the Mustangs drowned, they made in a kind of memorial, they pushed stones into a mound close to Big Tom's former lodge and would frequently visit it, particularly eclipse as well as. Storm was filmed by Storm Wildlife Cams, currently a powerful yearling instructing others. Young horse's swimming skills, Big Tom had demonstrated to him the same perseverance and patience as his beaver. Minter had demonstrated, making sure each of. Prior to continuing, I was aware of water safety. The valley's beavers appeared to be able to identify Storm when they went to their dams. They displayed none, rather than the typical warning behaviors, coming out to watch him with what appeared to acknowledgement years after Storm turned into his own band stallion, leading his family with uncommon insight into water security. None of his band members ever drowned. Outstanding performance in the nation of flash floods. Ranchers in the area started referring to him as the beaver horse's remarkable talent to anticipate and steer clear of hazardous water. Regarding the relationship between Big Tom and Storm had left a permanent legacy. That wisdom and loving sacrifice can surpass the limitations that nature appears to be imposed in the Montana wilderness. Horses continue to transmit the lessons from a beaver who made a decision. Always choose compassion above instinct, altering the coexistence of two species in the wild. If you're moved by this tale, please leave a comment and subscribe to the channel, such as giving it to someone who needs to learn about the amazing connections that bind all life things together.